Hey everybody, it is Dean Z speaking to you from yet another anonymous hotel room. This is the glamour of business travel. This time I am in Chicago and the room doesn't have a chair or a desk. So I am sitting on the floor in front of the window and yeah, this is great. Dustin, I miss you. All right, let's get started. I'm going to do an application file reading today. This one is going to be someone who enrolled a few years ago, whose LSAT and GPA were both below our median for the year, who went on to be just a spectacular, not just student at the law school, but just a general great citizen, kind of person that faculty and students all knew and loved and made a huge contribution. So I want to I wanted to pick someone both who was successful in getting in, but then also successful in law school, like really amazingly successful, so that those of you who are applying to your dream school with below median numbers might feel a little encouraged. Because as you will see, even though I think she is stupendous in many ways, she's not like a crazy superhero or anything like that. So she is attainably amazing. So let's get started, all right? As always, let us start with the resume. I can see from her resume that she went to a small elite liberal arts school on the East Coast, and she majored in public policy, and she tells me that she has a GPA of 3.751, which I just want to say is a little funny. Like, you don't really need to take your GPA out to the third space. It's not achieving anything. And as I've said before, you don't need to put your GPA on the resume at all, because I have it elsewhere in the materials. But, nothing wrong with that. Just want to poke a little fun there. She tells me about her awards at the top, and I note right away that she got an award for excellence in a foreign language. I won't say which one, just because it's pretty rare and I don't want anyone to know who I'm talking about here. And so, but it's very impressive to me because it's both rare and a very difficult language. So that jumps out at me. Also, she talks about another award that she won where she uses an acronym that is undefined and that I am not familiar with. So that's, this is, I'm telling you about this person who's amazing, and I'm already giving her grief for two tiny little things at the very top of her resume, but she can take it. She tells me that she wrote a thesis on something to do with college athletics, so that's impressive. That tells me that's someone who both has a lot of writing experience and a lot of research experience. Although I will note here that earlier this week I was asked by someone, do I think everybody who has the opportunity to do a thesis should do a thesis just to show their writing? And I would say definitely not. Like, you should only do a thesis if it speaks to you, if your major and the topic that you're considering is something that you really want to spend a lot of time on, because there are lots of ways to develop your writing and lots of ways to indicate your writing skills. This is just one, and colleges tend to have lots of different opportunities to explore and shine and find your fit. So don't feel compelled to do a thesis if that's not your jam. But she did, and it speaks to me. So, and then she also did an independent study on the same topic. So that's interesting. And then I go down one more line and I see that she was on the captain of a varsity sports team in college. So, okay, now I see the interest in college athletics. And it is very impressive to me that someone is a captain of a varsity team. And again, I'm not going to identify which sport, so I can make this as anonymous as possible, but I will tell you it's a sport that I think takes a ton of mental, what's a good word for that? Ton of mental gumption to stick with it. So I'm already intrigued by this candidate, just a few lines in. She also worked as a TA. She also worked as a mentor for college students, and was in a sorority. So she's been very active. go down a little further, and she's talking about her work experience. And I see that she is a litigation legal assistant at a really great firm in New York City. So, okay, so this is someone who has been seriously exploring the world of law, and, you know, presumably we know she knows what she's getting into and applying to law school. Again, it is not necessary, just like with a thesis, it's not necessary that you work as a legal assistant in order to explore law, but it is one indication, and that's the signal she's sending me. Carrying on, I see that she has, in the summers during school, so she's worked as a legal assistant since graduating, and I can see that in the summers, every year in college, she worked at some kind of legal organization, twice at smaller firms, once for a government organization, and then she also worked as an orientation leader, like designing an orientation program during several summers. So, you know, someone who's both working and volunteering, so doing all the right things. And she's also she is also currently volunteering as a mentor in a reading program at the time she's applying. So, and then she gives me her interests at the end, which we all know I love. So yoga, vegetarian cooking, and I'll just say I know that she is still a vegetarian, so dedication, and then a couple other things. So, okay, moving on to her essays. She starts out talking about her experience in the sport that I mentioned, and how she had to wake up early every weekend morning to go to practice, and you know, work out. And so she's talking. So this is good. This is a show don't tell moment. She's not saying like, I am hardworking, I am motivated, I don't shirk from hard things. She just says, I used to have to get up very early in the morning to go work out in high school. And then she moves from there to talking about how, as part of that sport, she started training, or coaching rather, as a volunteer, a very young child who had autism and who wanted to get into this sport. And she learned how good the sport was for the child and for people with the condition of autism. And she just saw a real transformation. So it's a nice pivot. It's like, I'm an athlete, but here I am volunteering. Here I am showing, you know, understanding of someone else's condition, and appreciating that and helping with it. And then she again makes a nice smooth pivot to why she's interested in law, and it is again relating to her sports, and she's interested specifically in Title IX policy and how she is interested in, you know, a career eventually in sports law. So one thing I often will tell people when they're talking about essays is, don't try to work too many things in, right? Don't tell me everything about yourself that you would love me to know, because it'll just be kind of a mishmash of an essay, and it will be hard to kind of keep it together. This author manages in 2 pages to tell me a lot of important things about herself, and convey a lot about her character traits, but she doesn't do too many things. She keeps it tight. She makes good transitions, and manages to convey a lot without going overboard. She sort of takes it right to the limit, in my opinion. More would be too much. And then she has 2 additional essays. One is an LSAT Addendum, and these can be tricky because if you are saying that you don't think your LSAT is indicative of your potential as a law student, there's really only one great argument to make for that, and that is, in my SAT or ACT, I also didn't score well, and then I went on to do very well in college. It isn't helpful to say, I just don't think you should pay attention to it. I just don't think it's indicative. I know that I am better than this. that may be very well true, but like you have to leave it to me to make that decision. Telling me that isn't going to make the argument, right? Like you've applied with the LSAT that you have, so I know you think you can do the work. So saying that explicitly just isn't going to be convincing. You have to let all the rest of the application do the work for you. So I tread into this LSAT addendum wondering, okay, what are we going to say? What is she going to say? And she talks about how she took it twice. The first time, she was very disappointed in her score. Did she tell me here what it is? No, she doesn't. We still don't know because I haven't gotten to that part of the application yet. So she said she was very disappointed in the score. Then she waited 2 years, studied in a much different way, was much better prepared, and her score went up 7 points, which is a big jump for a score to go up. And I usually say if you go up 6 or more points and you can point to something to help me understand why, you should definitely do that. So she does that, and she says, but I don't love my score. I don't think it is indicative of what I can do. And if that were where she'd left it, I would have just said, you shouldn't include that sentence. But she went on to say, this is why I don't think it's indicative. And she did exactly what I said a couple minutes ago. She says, here's my SAT score. SAT. Sorry, couldn't remember if it was SAT or ACT. She says, here's my SAT score. And it was way below the median at the school that I attended, and yet I scored, I had a GPA of 3.751 in a difficult, with a difficult selection of classes, and so I really outperformed there, and I will outperform on my LSAT score. I will outperform my LSAT score as well. So she did that, 10 out of 10 on what she should have done in that essay. The next essay is about why Michigan, and she starts it off, and I think this is always, people always, I think they feel like they have to write a why XYZ school essay if they are invited to do so. And I always say, if you have like a specific reason, great, or reasons, great. If you're just going to say stuff that is sort of general and applicable to many other schools of the same type, or if you're just quoting from the school's website, it's not the greatest way to show your interest. And I think if there's another essay that you could write, or if you could spend time doing something else that might help your application, editing your personal statement or something like that, you're better off doing that. But she does have some specific reasons about why Michigan. She starts it off in a cute way. She talks about an athlete who attended University of Michigan in her same sport, who she really admired. And so as a young person, very young person, she became captivated by University of Michigan and put this person's poster on her wall, that kind of stuff. And again, that's sort of frivolous. If she left it there, I'd be like, that has really nothing to do with the law school. But it's also kind of endearing, right? And so it's a great start. And then she goes on from there to, talk substantively about certain professors at the law school whose work she is very interested in, specifically relating to her research in Title IX. So she shows a familiarity with the school. She's very specific about why she wants those professors. And then this is embarrassing to say, but she talks about how I sent her a note encouraging her to apply, and I wrote a note on it, and it really captured her attention and made her feel like this was a school that might really be interested in her as a human being, which we were. And she also talks about how she liked, Michigan's discussion, the way Michigan presents itself, basically. I don't want to get into this too much because it's not a sales pitch for Michigan here. But, she's very specific about what she likes about the way the University of Michigan Law School presents itself and how she wants to go to that kind of school. So good specific reasons, 1 page, puts a lot in there, gets in and out, does her job. Okay, so now I'm at the part where I see her law school report or her credential assembly service report, and I can see first information about her grades. She starts out in her, shows that in her first year, she has about a 3.6. 3.5, and then she really starts pulling it up as she goes along. And in her by her junior year, she's getting a 3.9, and then her senior year she had above a 4 point. So she's really upward trajectory. Nothing at no point was it a problematic GPA. So she like sort of gets her feet under her, and then gets really good as she gets into more advanced courses. So we like to see that. And then, as she mentioned, she took the LSAT twice. The first time, she got a 150, which is a pretty low score, and it was right around at the year she took it. It is right around the 50th percentile. And then the second time she took it, she increased it to a 157, which in the year she took it was right about at the upper quartile. So that's not a strong score, obviously, but it's also not a score that, in my mind, if you're like the upper quartile of scores and above, you are, I feel like my presumption is you can do the work. Below that, I also think people can do the work, but it's a heavier lift, and there are ways, I'm looking for a demonstration of that and more closely. So she, and as I say, it is rare to go up 7 points. So that is also something that I'm looking at. Okay, here is her transcript. I see nothing on here that is jumping out at me beyond what I've already mentioned about her upward trajectory. She has, mostly A's, a B+ here and there. I see one W in a music class, so not worried about that. Okay, last thing to look at are her letters of rec, and they're terrific. So she has 2 faculty members and 1 employer, which I always think is sort of the paradigmatic best mix of letters, if you can do that. So the first letter is from the language class that I mentioned at the top. Very challenging language, and this person is really singing her praises. Mentions this is a very difficult subject, and you can't do well simply because you're gifted academically, which this candidate is. You have to be diligent and hardworking, and she really was. She went far beyond the requirements. And then he mentions, he says one of the brightest students enrolled, and also mentions that her interpersonal skills are outstanding. Next, the second one is from the employer. This person uses the word superb, that she performs superbly and receives praise from all the lawyers at the firm, and is sought out consistently by junior and senior associates working on one particular case, which she mentions, which is at the time was a kind of a famous case that was going on in the world. And so, very complex and a lot at stake, and they seek her out to work on that matter, and talks about her attention to detail and genuine interest in strategy and in the work that they are doing. And clearly this is someone, the writer clearly, is very high on this candidate, really thinks well of her abilities, and also echoes what she says elsewhere in her application about what her legal interests are. So that's nice. It's nice to have, I know people sometimes feel like they need to say what a legal interest is that they have. You don't. If you are just sort of generally interested in law school, that's fine. But I know sometimes people feel that they need to do it. And so it's nice to know when someone does, like, oh, here's someone echoing that. This is real. They really are interested in this area. And in, sports law, obviously at the University of Michigan, we got some sports. So she's picked a topic that I think makes her a good fit at our institution, which is also something to think about. Like, don't say, if you're saying you're interested in a particular area of the law and you're applying to school that doesn't really have much in that area, that can actually work against you. So you got to think carefully if you're going to mention a particular area of the law that you're interested in And you may not want to say that for every school that you're applying to. All right, the final letter is from a professor in her major, and again, really singing her praises. One phrase in particular jumps out at me, which says she was easily the best TA she, the writer is a she has ever had, and has lots of other praise, but you know, that's pretty high praise indeed. Okay, so I read all that a number of years ago, decided to admit it was exactly as promised. As I say, she was a fantastic student, super glad she came to Michigan, and so, but she, you know, just want to emphasize, like, she's great, but she's also human, right? She made a couple small mistakes or a couple things that I say don't do, but she basically got in by doing all the things she needed to do in terms of how to present herself in a positive and accurate light. I mean, I can say, knowing her well now at this point, super authentic. So yeah, this is attainable, and for those of you who are worried about your numbers but feel like, you know, you're sure you can do the work, just be like her. So, all right, well, thank you for watching. I hope this was useful. I hope you forgive me for the insane looking backdrop behind me. And yeah, thanks to Dustin. Thanks for nothing, Dustin. Wish you were here in Chicago with me. No, thank you to Dustin for cleaning up all the hesitations that I'm sure I have in here in quiet spots where I'm trying to find my place. And wherever you go, go blue.